They put me at a small table by the swinging kitchen doors. From that spot, I watched my son cut the cake, take pictures, and lean in for his first dance while servers shuffled past with trays. I'd paid for the whole thing, every arrangement, every chair, the band, the favors, and yet when the music came up and the toasts began, I wasn't really in the room. I was tucked behind the action, near the smell of dishwater and onions. The way a person can stand inches away from a party and still not be invited to. If this story finds you, tap subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. That's what I say these days when I need to steady my voice. There was no sign with my name, no little card, no welcome greeting. There was just a folding chair with a taped-on note and a view of a service hallway stacked with extra chairs and plastic tubs. A low cart with a crooked wheel squealed each time someone pushed it, announcing itself like a cricket that had taken up residence under my chair. I stood there for a moment, blinking hard. The hallway smelled like steam and spilled gravy, and the plaster near the baseboards was nicked from years of carts clipping the wall. I looked down at my dress, mauve chiffon I'd had hemmed by hand, and wondered if I'd overdone it. I'd sat for 3 hours that morning, while a woman pinned and sprayed my hair into soft waves. 3 hours. Then I stepped into the ceremony imagining I would be welcomed as the groom's mother, and instead, I learned I was a problem. Through the opening, I could see Ethan laughing for photos, shoulders pressed close to friends and relatives from her side. He let her mother kiss his cheek like she'd been the one who raised him, as if she'd been the parent awake in the rough years when he didn't sleep, sitting with him on the bathroom floor through stomach bugs, waiting up, clipping coupons so he could get the shoes he wanted, as if she'd been the one keeping the Mother's Day notes he made when he still called me Mom. My hands were trembling. I felt it in my wrists first, a faint electrical buzz that made my fingers want to shake open and drop whatever I was holding. I caught his eye, just for a second, and saw the flinch I knew too well. Theme, he'd say. Like the way he said it when he didn't want to tell me the real thing. Theme, as in the decor, the vibe. He glanced toward the doors, the ones that kept swinging as servers pushed through. The thick metal edge smacked the wall with a crisp bang every time it swung back. Laughter spilled through the gap in waves. A dark blotch marked the tile by my shoes, tacky enough that when I moved, the soles pulled like tape. I studied my nails, pink and new, lifted my chin, and breathed until my throat didn't threaten to close. Then I pulled out the program they'd handed me at the church. Cream card stock, elegant cursive, no mention of the groom's mother, no reading from me, no candle lighting, no little nod anywhere. It was like I'd been airbrushed from the day, the way you crop a photo to hide the messy corner. The door bumped open again. For a heartbeat, I saw the chandelier throwing glitter across the room and the band starting up. Conversations lifted like a flock taking off. I thought of glass, how a pane looks fine until a thin fracture shows up and you realize the whole sheet is under stress. You live like that for a while, pretending, until the right touch makes it shatter. I fixed my gaze on a pale patch of paint near a red fire extinguisher on the wall. I stared until the white blurred. That small, ugly spot became my anchor. If I let myself look at anything else, I worried I would dissolve in front of a girl balancing crab puffs on a tray, because once the crying started, I wasn't sure I could stop. And while I stood there with my breath carefully caged, I made a decision. I made a call. Short, direct. 3 words that ended 3 lines of service. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I canceled the brunch flowers. I canceled the second set for the band. I cut the post-reception open bar. When I hung up, there was no shame burning my throat. There was no regret knocking around in my chest. What I felt was the first warmth of something I hadn't felt in years, my own authority. It was small, the size of a match head, but it glowed in my ribcage, a reminder that I get a say. I had plans now, my plans, and they didn't include playing the wallet and the ghost at the same time. I did not sleep, not 1 minute. I lay on the stiff hotel bed in my dress, staring at a ceiling that seemed lower than it had the night before. The scent of expensive roses clung to the room and mixed with the sour salt on my skin. Humiliation had a texture that night, a gummy second layer I couldn't scrub off. Sometime in the early hours, I sat up, The clock on the nightstand glowed red in the dark. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Instead, I opened the budget on my tablet, the document I'd been tracking like a second job for over a year. Every line item lived in my head. Deposits, tips, upgrades, rush fees, last-minute add-ons. I knew every cent. I could see the whole story of the wedding in numbers, right there on the screen. Engraved invitations from an Etsy vendor in Vermont, specialty linens that got swapped in at the last second because someone decided the original ones looked flat, a cake upgrade because the trending design had 2 extra tiers. That's how a modest plan turned into this gala. The venue moved from the community church hall we'd discussed to a space with marble floors and a chandelier big enough to swallow a child, and the bill followed right along. Nobody volunteered to share the bill, not Ethan, not her parents. I didn't press them. I wanted him to enjoy what I couldn't provide when he was little. That was the truth, even if it hurt to say it to myself. I closed my eyes, and in my mind, I was back by the kitchen, the smell of fryer oil hitting the back of my throat, my stomach clenching. I double-checked the card on the screen and felt the cold slap of recognition. My card had been used without my permission. Then there was the note I hadn't noticed before, a casual little line on a transfer that made it clear where they thought the money came from and who they thought would keep feeding the meter. I reached to the lamp and clicked it on. The light stung. In the mirror above the desk, I saw mascara smudged under my eyes and a woman whose face looked 10 years older than it had that morning. And then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted inside me. I smoothed my hair back. I washed my face and sat at the desk. I wrote 3 emails, each one clear and polite. One to the florist. We're canceling the brunch centerpieces and the next day bouquets. Please consider the matter closed. One to the band. Thank you, but we won't need your second performance. Adjust the invoice. One to the bar vendor. We're scaling back the post-reception service. Confirm the reduced total. When I hit send on the last one, my shoulders dropped. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I wasn't furious, not yet. I was finished with being convenient, finished being tolerated for optics while my checkbook did the talking. If there were going to be consequences, then for once, they would land where they belonged. They would remember who made that celebration possible. Back at the venue, the night kept rolling. I pressed my back against a metal cooler to stay out of the way and tried not to listen. But the room next door was loud as a parade. Every laugh, every cheer, every clink of glass came through the seam of the door like water through a crack. The door opened just enough for me to catch a sliver of the room. They clustered before the over-the-top flower wall. Someone's idea of a dream, smiling into phones, arms linked. He's the kindest man, someone said into a microphone. Chloe is so lucky. Laughter. Cheers. I went still. At the head table sat Linda, powdered and glowing as if she'd earned the right to hold court. The same woman who never returned a single text about payments and never once offered to contribute. Beside her lounged the father of the bride, basking in the attention like this was all his doing. I thought of every double shift I'd worked so Ethan could have a life without hand-me-downs. And there he was, my Ethan, smiling like a stranger between his new family, as if years of history had been solved by sticking me by a door and letting it swing shut. A young server brushed me as she squeezed by with a tray of champagne flutes. I held my breath. My shoulders and jaw clenched so hard a pulse beat behind my eyes. My heart felt heavy, a stubborn stone that wouldn't budge. I thought of the seating chart. Weeks earlier, I'd asked Chloe gently if she'd figured out where I'd be sitting. She'd said, "We're still finalizing," with that smooth smile people use when they want you to back off. I'd let it go then, telling myself it was nerves, that she had 1,000 little choices to juggle and couldn't carry one more. Now, standing by the kitchen doors with the smell of fryer oil clinging to my dress, I understood that the answer had always been right there in that smile. A young server with a tight bun paused, her tray hovering at my shoulder. "Ma'am, are you comfortable here?" she asked, eyes flicking toward the dining room and then back to me like she knew there was something wrong but didn't have permission to say it. "I'm fine," I lied. My voice came out thin. She swallowed, nodded, and pushed into the noise again. I watched the door swing, watched the happy blur of color, heads thrown back, the rituals of being included. Another server squeezed by and almost caught my elbow. "Sorry," she whispered, already gone. From the far side of the room, Chloe turned as if sensing where I stood. Our eyes met for a beat through the gap. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look frantic or embarrassed. She lifted her chin a fraction, the corners of her mouth curving up, the kind of expression that fits any caption. Perfect. On theme. Under control. It landed like a hand pressing me back into my place. Theme. Ethan had told me when I'd asked about the linens, about the extra arrangements, about whether I should wear the dress with sleeves or without. We're going for a vibe. He'd said it with the practiced lightness of a person who didn't want to explain. Now I could see what the theme really was, a story that didn't have room for me, not in any visible way. The palette didn't allow for the woman who paid. A clipboard appeared beside me, attached to a woman in a black jumpsuit and headset. She looked up, startled to find me standing there. "Oh," she said, bright and apologetic in the same breath. "We thought you'd moved to cocktail hour." "Where's my seat?" I asked. No edge, just a question. She scanned her list. There were some last-minute adjustments to keep the tables balanced." The practiced phrases tumbled out. "We can set a place in here so you're close to the action. We don't want to disrupt the flow on the floor." "The flow?" I repeated, tasting how ridiculous it sounded while also knowing those words had the weight of orders behind them. "I'm the groom's mother." She winced, and I knew she knew, but knowing didn't make her brave. "I'll check again," she said, and vanished into the light, leaving me with the hum of compressors and the steady thud of the door against the stopper. At the front of the room, the DJ called for toasts. A hush rippled, 100 bodies arranging themselves toward the head table. I could just see the curve of Ethan's shoulder, the line of his jaw as he angled toward the microphone someone was handing across the linen. He looked so handsome it hurt. "First, a few words from the parents," the DJ announced. Laughter, claps, the polite anticipation of a script everyone understands. Linda stood, dabbed at the corner of her eye with a folded napkin like a woman who'd earned tears. She took the mic and started in, voice syrupy and steady. I couldn't hear the exact words, only the crowd's soft awes and bursts of laughter when she hit the punchlines. The door thumped, letting in a crest of sound, then swung back again, cutting it off like waves against a seawall. I felt a heat crawl up the back of my neck. My name wasn't on the program. My seat wasn't at a table. My voice wasn't invited. The pattern was too clean to be a mistake. You don't accidentally caution everyone to leave the groom's mother out of every photo, every small moment, every mention. That takes curation. That takes care. A bridesmaid floated over to the kitchen to fix a slipping strap. "Do you need anything?" she asked me without looking, bent over her reflection in the stainless panel of the fridge. "I'm all set," I said, and she nodded like we'd shared a pleasantry and darted back into the glow. I pressed my tongue to my palate and counted to 10. Somewhere, someone clinked a glass, chanting for a kiss. The crowd whooped. I pictured Chloe and Ethan leaning into each other, the picture perfect. Did he glance toward the side door? Did he think of me at all? When we'd done the rehearsal the night before, I'd stood behind the last pew, minding my hands so they didn't fuss with my corsage. I'd told myself to be adaptable, to let the details be theirs. I thought that was generosity. I thought that was love. I didn't realize how easy it is for some people to accept your flexibility as permission to erase you. The woman with the headset returned with a brittle smile. "We can bring you a small table right here," she said, pointing to a sliver of wall beneath a buzzing exit sign. "We'll make it pretty." There it was, the solution that solved nothing. Make it pretty. Keep it tidy. Hide the human mess of feelings behind a ribbon and a votive candle. I nodded like I was grateful. My face knew how to behave even when my insides wanted to kick the table leg until the centerpiece toppled. A guy in a white shirt and loosened tie ducked into the kitchen for more ice. He almost collided with me. "Whoa, sorry," he said, then blinked as recognition dawned. "Hey, you're—" "Hi," I said, saving him from having to choose a title that would box me into the wrong story. "You must be so proud," he said, earnest, already turning away. The door swung again, framing Chloe's flower wall and the glossy smiles in front of it. My stomach turned. Pride wasn't what I felt. Not then. What I felt was the clean, cold edge of clarity. There's a relief in naming what you're in. It snaps everything into focus. You stop trying to puzzle your way into a seat that was never for you. You stop hoping someone will notice and fix it. You stop wasting grace on people who are saving their manners for an audience. A server with a tray of water glasses paused. "Do you want me to set one here for you?" she asked softly, like she was offering more than a drink. "Yes," I said. My throat was dry enough to crack. I took the glass and held it with both hands, letting the chill sink into my palms. The ice knocked faintly against the sides. I watched a drop of condensation slide down and disappear into the ring, already forming on the tray. Past the doors, Linda leaned in to kiss Ethan's temple as she handed the mic back. Photographers snapped. The band leader joked that they'd need tissues at the ready. A table of cousins, hers I could tell by the way they clustered around her father, pounded the linen with their fists and laughed. I felt my face arrange itself into a neutral mask. It was either that or show them exactly how much power they had to hurt me. I wasn't going to give them that scene. If they wanted me invisible, I could oblige, on my terms. "Ready for dinner service," someone called behind me. A line of plates moved past in a practiced ballet. Steak, chicken, a lone vegetarian dish with roasted squash like a jewel. The room beyond glowed brighter, as if the chandelier had found a new setting. The door swung again, met the stopper with its tidy thunk. I stepped back out of the traffic and smoothed my dress where the fabric had wrinkled from the brush of trays. I wasn't shaking anymore. The tremor had burned off, leaving something steadier behind. I picked up my clutch and slid my phone into the inner pocket, the zipper sound small and final. I told myself very quietly, the way you tell a child the truth with your eyes on theirs, "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a choice. And now I get to make mine." I didn't wait for anyone to come find me. I stepped into the shadow of the service hall, pulled my phone from my clutch, and made 3 short calls. No preface, no story. To the florist. "We won't need the brunch centerpieces tomorrow. Please cancel and confirm." To the band leader. "Thank you for tonight. There won't be a second set. Send a revised total." To the bar vendor. "We're ending service after the reception. Adjust the invoice and reply in writing. 3 tidy cuts." It felt like snipping threads that had been cinched around my ribs. On the other side of the door, applause rolled and broke. I could hear Ethan's laugh carry and then fade. I slid the phone back into the pocket of my dress and stood there until the cart traffic eased. A server flashed me a quick, worried look. I smoothed my skirt, found my purse, and walked out without asking permission from anyone. No scene, no goodbye. Just the clean quiet of my heels on tile. The hotel room greeted me with its neutral carpet and heavy curtains. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't kick off my shoes for a long time. I lay back across the coverlet in full makeup, the zipper biting into my ribs, and stared at the cracked paint line where the wall met the ceiling. Even the air felt held back, thick with the faint perfume of the bouquets we'd paid extra to have everywhere. Sleep didn't come. It wouldn't even try. The hum under my skin was too loud. I sat up and opened the tablet. The spreadsheet bloomed into the glow. Tabs for deposits, final payments, tips, outstanding balances. I had built it cell by cell over the past year, the way you build a raft when you know you'll have to cross something deep. Line by line, the night turned into numbers. The invitations from an Etsy shop in Vermont, the specialty napkins that replaced the perfectly fine ones 2 weeks out because someone decided the original texture didn't photograph well, the cake that grew an extra tier because everyone's doing it this season, the venue upgrade that came with marble floors and a chandelier that made people look up. None of it was a surprise anymore. All of it had my name on the credit line. I scrolled, and there it was, tucked like a splinter. Charges that weren't mine to approve. Same card, different hands. Then a transfer note in casual slang, the kind of thing you type when you think the money is faceless. "His mom's paying, go big." The words burned cold. Not a misunderstanding, a belief. I set the tablet down and let my hands rest in my lap until the shaking passed. Then I pulled the chair to the desk and opened my email. If there was going to be a pulse to the night, it was going to be mine. I wrote to the florist first. "Thank you for your work to date. We will not need the brunch arrangements or next day bouquets. Please confirm cancellation and remove remaining charges." I read it twice, trimmed a word, and sent. The band next. "We appreciate tonight's performance. Please omit the late night set and issue a revised invoice for the earlier end time. Send by morning. Send." Then the bar. "As discussed by phone, we're ending service with the reception. Adjust the total accordingly and confirm receipt. Send." Each message went out like a steady breath I'd been holding for months. My shoulders lowered an inch. I rubbed the corner of one eye with a tissue and caught the dark print of mascara. The mirror over the desk showed me a woman with hair still pinned tight and eyes that looked like they'd stopped asking permission. I went back to the spreadsheet and tagged the canceled items, noting the new totals. My cursor hovered over other lines I'd funded without a second thought, thinking of every double shift I'd taken on so that Ethan wouldn't have to notice what I was patching together behind the scenes. I had told myself that covering the costs was love, that giving him the day he wanted would be a way of making up for all the lean years. I believed that. I still do. But love doesn't mean I have to stand in a hallway and pretend I don't exist. The room was so quiet I could hear the mini fridge cycle on and off. Somewhere below, doors thudded faintly as other guests settled in. My phone buzzed a few times, messages lighting up the lock screen with congratulations, with photos of the flower wall, with captions full of hearts. I let them stack there, unread. I thought of Linda, powdered and glowing, accepting credit with such ease. I thought of Chloe's small, controlled smile when she found me by the kitchen. I thought of Ethan's quick glance at the door and how fast he looked away. Then I thought of my own name, missing from the program, missing from the microphone, missing from the story. The ache that rose in me was real and heavy, but it didn't knock me off my chair. It set me steady in it. I opened a new document and drafted a short note to myself, what had been cut, what still stood, what next steps would look like. It wasn't a manifesto, it was a list. Call credit card company in the morning. Save screenshots of the transactions with dates. Keep every reply from vendors. Close the loop. By the time I closed the tablet, the red digits on the alarm clock had rolled through half the night. I took off my shoes at last, lined them by the door like a person who expects to use them again, and washed the makeup from my face until the water ran clear. The zipper came down with a sigh. I slid the dress onto its hanger, hung it on the back of the bathroom door, and stood there for a moment with the towel pressed to my eyes. I crawled onto the bed in a robe that smelled faintly of bleach and lay on my side, palm flat against my sternum. The frantic beat had settled into something slower and deliberate. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt accurate. Every small correction I made tonight pointed my life a few degrees away from being used. Before I turned off the lamp, I checked my inbox one more time. An auto reply from the band. Received. Will resend invoice in the morning. A quick answer from the florist. Cancellation noted. The bar's out of office, promising a response at 8 a.m. I filed each message into a folder with a name that made sense only to me. Click, click, click. The room sank into darkness. Outside, a car horn chirped, and then the parking lot went still. I lay there listening to the silence I'd chosen, and when the tears finally came, they weren't the kind that soak your pillow. They were a handful of quiet drops, the kind that make space. I didn't draft speeches for anyone. I didn't write a text asking why. I didn't compose a post to explain myself. I let the night hold what it held, and as the first pale seam of morning edged the curtains, I knew exactly what I would do next and what I would not do anymore. Morning came on like a scrape you forget about until hot water hits it. The room had that stale sweetness from last night's roses, and the alarm clock flashed a time that didn't match how tired I felt. I lay still long enough to hear the building wake, doors closing down the hall, the slow buzz of the ice machine, a muffled laugh from someone who'd had a better night than I did. My phone showed the replies I was waiting for. Short. Professional. Confirmed. I slid each one into the folder I'd made and closed the screen. No triumph, just a neat stack of proof. I packed without thinking much. Shoes into their bag, dress on its hanger, the tablet in my purse. The mirror over the desk showed me with puffy eyes and a mouth trying to sit in a straight line. I held that line as I checked out. Outside, the parking lot was gray and quiet. Someone had left a program on the curb, damp at the edges. I folded myself into the driver's seat, let the silence fill the car, and started the engine. No radio. No helpful voice to tell me where to turn. The way home didn't need instructions. The highway unspooled, mile markers ticking by like a metronome. Every now and then, a flash of last night leapt up. Applause, the band hitting a chorus, the glitter of a chandelier across someone's upturned face. It felt like hearing a party through a wall you can't walk through. I gripped the wheel and kept my eyes on the road. When I pulled into my driveway, my ribs loosened a fraction. The house stood exactly as I'd left it, ordinary and steady in a way that made my shoulders drop. I carried the garment bag inside, hung the dress on the bedroom door, and set my purse on the dresser. The quiet had weight, but it was mine. I went to the hall closet and reached for the old shoebox where I keep things I can't throw away. It lived behind winter scarves and a tin of buttons, dusty enough that my fingers came back gray. Inside, the box still smelled faintly of paper and cologne, the cheap kind that clings to paperback pages. Beneath cards and school pictures and ticket stubs was a long envelope with Andrew's neat handwriting across the front. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my lap. The flap had been opened years ago, then tucked back in as if to keep something from escaping. I smoothed it with my palm, feeling the ridge of the crease under my skin. It's strange how your body knows before your mind does, how your breath changes when you're about to step into a room you can't step back out of. I slid the letter free. His handwriting marched across the page, careful loops and straight stems, the same as on grocery lists he used to tape to the fridge. Catherine, it began. He always wrote my full name when he wanted to be serious. My eyes traced the first lines, the formal rhythm of a man who was better on paper than in a fight. The house held its breath with me. The clock in the kitchen ticked. A compressor kicked on and then quieted. I read the greetings, the preface, the way he tried to prepare me with polite words that didn't soften anything. I pressed my thumb to the edge of the page and kept going. Outside, a car rolled by and the sound faded. I shifted on the bed to the spot where the mattress dips, the place that remembers me, and let the paper rest against my knees. The letters were steady. Mine were not. I had the sense of standing at the lip of cold water, knowing exactly how it would feel on my skin and choosing to step in anyway. I drew in a long breath, let it out slow, and read, "Catherine," he wrote, and seeing my full name in his hand steadied me the way a railing does when you're about to descend into cold water. He apologized for keeping something too long, said he'd told himself there would be a right time, that protecting me had become the excuse he hid behind whenever the truth pressed on his throat. He took a paragraph to say he respected me, another to say he failed me. Then he put it down in one plain sentence that made the room tilt. "Ethan isn't your biological son." I read it twice because my mind shoved the words back out, as if they were food my body couldn't take in. The page trembled a little in my hands before I made them still. There were no details, no names, no dates. He didn't write how or why. He wrote that it didn't change what he'd seen me be, a mother in the most ordinary, holy ways. Sleepless nights, hot towels, spelling tests at the kitchen table, the stubborn love of showing up again and again. He wrote that he knew he'd built something on a lie and then lived in the house like it wouldn't someday collapse. I sat very straight on the edge of the bed, the letter spread across my knees. The house sounded the same as it always did. The soft tick of the heating vent, a car whispering past, a branch knocking once against the side of the house. My chest felt open and empty, like a door someone had left swinging. Shock didn't take me under. It laid me out flat, and in that flatness I found a strange, fierce quiet. Of course I'd felt some seam I couldn't name. Of course I'd lived with a hairline crack under the paint, pretending the wall was solid. But the truth didn't reach back and erase anything. It couldn't pull up the hours I'd held him when he was small and feverish, or the way he'd relaxed into sleep when my hand smoothed his hair. It couldn't revise the mornings I left work late because he needed help finding a clean shirt and a calm voice. Love had done the daily work. Love had clocked in and stayed late. The hurt wasn't the blood. It was the choice to keep me in the dark, to let me carry the weight without the dignity of knowing what it was. I folded the letter along its old crease. I didn't cry. The feeling that moved through me wasn't the drowning kind. It was clarity. The clean snap of a twig when you stop pretending it will bend. I stood, smoothed the bedspread, and put the letter back into its envelope. On the desk, my tablet glowed where I'd left it. I opened my email and reread the confirmations that had come in while I was driving. Florist, band. I typed a fresh line to each. Thank you for confirming. Proceed as noted, and hit send. Then I called the bar vendor again, listening to the ring, listening to myself breathe. When the owner answered, I kept it simple. Following up on our conversation, we're ending after the reception. Please send the adjusted total. He agreed, his tone brisk, and I thanked him. I offered no explanation. I owed none. When the calls were done, I took a photo of the bank check I'd written weeks ago, the one that had made the whole spectacle possible. I slid a sticky note to cover the routing and account numbers, made sure the date and amount were clear, and framed it against the neutral hotel stationery I'd brought home in my purse. My hands were steady. I opened Facebook, uploaded the picture, and posted it with no caption at all. Silence can be a hammer. Silence can also be a shield. Either way, it speaks. I put the phone face down on the dresser and stood for a moment, noticing the way my shoulders were standing level instead of hunched. I didn't want to debate in the comments. I didn't want to feed anyone's appetite for a show. I wanted the people who needed to see it, to feel the cold edge of what the day had been built on. The room brightened a notch as a cloud moved past the sun. I pulled my hair into a low knot and thought about breakfast, about putting something in my body that wasn't coffee and adrenaline. The grocery list I'd made earlier in the week sat magneted to the fridge down the hall. Honey bunches of oats, eggs, bananas, small things that made a morning a morning. My phone vibrated once with a like, then again, then a rattle of notifications tumbling over each other. I didn't turn it over. I went to the kitchen and took a glass from the cabinet, filled it from the tap, and drank until I had to pause for air. The cool water felt like it was rinsing something burnt from the back of my throat. On the counter sat the folder where I keep bills. I slid the newest receipts into sleeves and added the screenshots I'd taken of the unauthorized charges, tucking them behind the vendor emails like a prepared woman filing away a lesson she would not have to learn twice. I walked through the house, touching the back of a chair, the edge of a picture frame, the door jamb where tiny pencil marks recorded Ethan's growth, year after year. My fingers traced the highest line with his initials written beside it in my hand. I let the love of those years settle in me, not as a wound, but as proof. Whatever Andrew wrote on that page, it couldn't say otherwise. A message preview flashed on the phone. Someone had tagged me. Someone else had commented with 3 question marks. Another had sent a private note. Are you okay? I breathed in and out and left them all unopened. I wasn't going to be pulled into their version of the story, where my calm was rewritten as drama. Let them do their own math. Let them feel the weight of a fact without me cushioning it. I put the kettle on out of habit, then turned it off before it boiled. The quiet filled back in. I sent one more email, this time to myself. Subject line, next. In the body, I wrote a short list. Call the credit card company to dispute. Stop automatic payments I'd set up for their extras. Check on the deposit schedule for refunds. I added a line I didn't expect to write. Keep my explanations to a minimum. I hit send and watched the message land in my inbox like a promise. By late morning, the light had shifted across the floor into a bright square. Dust swam lazily in it, slow as snow. I stood in that square and felt deep and simple that I had stepped back into my life. It didn't look different. It felt different. It felt like the difference between holding your breath and letting it out. I lifted the envelope again and slid it back into the shoebox, tucked it beneath the old cards and photos, and returned the box to the closet. I closed the door and pressed my palm to the wood for a beat, grounding myself in that ordinary motion. Then I picked up my keys and my purse. At the door, I paused, not to reconsider, but to acknowledge it. The strange peace that comes when the worst thing you've been avoiding has already introduced itself and sat down. I locked the house and stepped into the day. I didn't rehearse what I would say to anyone. I didn't think about the comments stacking under the photo. I let the sun hit my face and decided I would move through the hours ahead without explaining what anyone had already chosen not to see. By noon, my phone was a hive. Likes from people I hadn't heard from in years. A cousin's question marks. A message from someone I barely knew asking if everything was okay, or post-okay. I let the screen go dark. My silence felt like the only part of this I could keep clean. If someone wanted to understand, they could replay the night and listen without me narrating it for them. I grabbed my list and went to the store. The automatic doors opened with their little whoosh and the cool air hit my face. I walked past the display of balloons and a pyramid of boxed cupcakes, past a stack of honey bunches of oats, straight to produce. Peaches, romaine, a handful of lemons. I stood to choose a bunch of bananas and felt the slight sway in my knees that comes after a sleepless night. "Catherine?" a voice said, soft like a hand on your sleeve. I turned and there was Erin, clutching a basket like she'd been holding her breath since last night. Her face did that quick flicker, glad to see me, then worried that glad might be the wrong expression. "I saw your post," she said, and then rushed to add, "and I saw last night." "What did you see?" I asked, not unkind. She swallowed. "They put you by the kitchen." Her eyes went glassy, then she blinked hard and kept going. "I kept looking for you. I asked a bridesmaid if she'd seen you and she said you were helping with the flow. I didn't know what to say without making a scene. She looked at the bananas in my hand like they might answer for her. The old me would have jumped in to make it easy. "Oh, don't worry about it. They were short on space. It was a misunderstanding." I felt the urge rise and then let it pass. "I was there," I said. "That's all." Erin nodded, shame flushing up her throat. I should have gone over. "You didn't put me there," I said. It was true. She let out a breath like I'd handed her a towel. We stood side by side for a minute, two women pretending to choose fruit, while a whole other conversation hovered just out of reach. "I loved your dress," she said finally, trying for light. "You looked beautiful." "Thank you," I said, and we both heard the way the words landed, not as balm, exactly, as fact. She touched my arm once, brief, and then excused herself with a promise to call me in a day or two. I nodded. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. Whatever came next didn't need to be decided in front of the bananas. At checkout, the cashier asked if I wanted help out, and I almost said yes, just to have someone walk me to my car and stand with me in the open air for a second. "I've got it," I said, smiling enough to make it easy for both of us. The cart wheels clicked over the seams in the concrete like a metronome. The sky had that flat afternoon light that makes everything look honest. When I turned onto my street, I saw it before I parked. An arrangement on my front step, tall enough to block part of the door. Roses and hydrangea, the same whites and blushes from last night, now slumped and browning at the edges, the water in the vase already cloudy, a business card tucked into the ribbon with no note, just a stamped logo. Maybe someone had scooped it off a table when the party was over. Maybe someone had dropped it here thinking it would smooth something. I left the groceries in the car and stood at the bottom of the steps. The flowers looked like a stand-in for an apology no one intended to say out loud. I thought about how many hours those blooms represented. Growing, cutting, arranging, delivering. I thought about the email I'd sent canceling the rest. I took the card and slid it into my pocket, then moved the arrangement off to the side of the porch where the sun would find it. I didn't bring it in. I couldn't fill my living room with that smell. Inside, the house wrapped around me with its familiar corners. I set the bags on the counter, washed the fruit, and lined the eggs in the fridge like small white stones. The simple tasks were a kind of prayer. My phone buzzed again and again. I let it. A notification flashed from Facebook. Someone had tagged me in a photo of the head table. I pressed the side button and quieted it. I walked through to the living room and picked up a frame from the bookshelf. Ethan at 10, grinning with a missing tooth. standing in a little league uniform that never quite fit his skinny shoulders. I traced the air above the glass and set it down. I wasn't revising our history. I was rewriting my part going forward. The voicemail icon stared up at me. 3 messages. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the counter while I rinsed lettuce. A cheerfully confused florist apologized for the mix-up about the delivery and promised to pick up whatever had been left at my address. The band leader confirmed the revised invoice and added tentatively that they'd had a wonderful time. The third voice was a cousin from Andrew's side, bright and nosy. Saw your pic. Wow. Call me. What happened? Like a woman circling a story she hoped would entertain her Sunday afternoon. I deleted each one without saving. The quiet settled again. I made a sandwich and ate it standing up, then forced myself to sit at the table like a person who has time. After, I pulled the folder of bills toward me and checked items off my next list. I disputed the unauthorized charges with the credit card company, calm as a clerk reading policy. I paused the extra auto payments I'd set up months ago when things felt cooperative. I saved each confirmation email into the folder I'd labeled with a plain name no one else would understand. Somewhere in there, messages shifted from puzzled to careful. A text from a neighbor, Mr. Carter, offered to bring over leftover brisket from a cookout, no questions asked. I smiled and texted back, "Thank you, that would be nice." A former coworker, Nurse Paula, sent a heart and the kind of note you send when you've seen too much life to be shocked by it. Here if you need coffee. No gossip, just coffee. I wrote back a single word, soon, and felt something in my chest loosen. On the porch, a bee investigated the wilting roses and then moved on. The arrangement slumped further as the sun slid across the yard. I let it return itself to the ground a little, petal by petal. Not everything needed rescuing. Late afternoon, I stepped outside with a trash bag and swept the fallen leaves off the steps. A neighbor across the street lifted a hand in a wave, and I waved back. No one shouted a question. No one came over with a face arranged for sympathy. The world kept spinning without pausing to gape, and that felt like mercy. Back inside, I wiped the counter, rinsed the vase I'd used for my own grocery store tulips last week, and filled it with water. I didn't have flowers for it yet. I liked the way it looked anyway. Clear, ready, expecting nothing more than to do its job when I set something in it. I gathered my hair into a clip and took a slow lap through the rooms, putting small things back where they belonged. A book spine straight on the shelf, a throw folded, a stack of mail sorted. It wasn't about tidiness, it was about deciding in a dozen little ways that I didn't have to live inside someone else's mess. When the sun started to tilt, I went to the porch and moved the arrangement from the step to the edge by the railing. A few petals fell, soft as moths. I didn't feel cruel, and I didn't feel kind. I felt sure. If anyone asked why I hadn't brought them in, and I doubted anyone would, I knew I wouldn't explain. I was through cushioning sharp edges with my own skin. Inside, the kettle clicked on, then off. I brewed tea and carried the mug to the couch. I didn't turn on the TV. I let the quiet be the soundtrack and listened to my breath slow. The day had been ordinary and exacting. I could feel the shape of my life settling back into my hands. The house dimmed gently as the light went. Somewhere down the street, a song drifted up from an open car window. Something soft and familiar, the kind of tune that has lived through a dozen summers. I curled my feet under me and thought about the people who'd reached out without demanding my story, the people who had always seen me without being told where to look. I made a list in my mind of who belonged at my table when I said it again. I didn't rehearse any speeches. I didn't line up arguments for later. I let everything that wasn't mine fall quiet and kept what was. Outside, the last of the day slid away. On the porch, the flowers slumped and kept their silence, same as me. I didn't mean to keep cleaning, but my hands needed work, so I pulled the shoebox back down and sifted through the layered years. Under the envelope I'd already read sat another, thinner one, tucked at an angle like it had slipped when I put things away last time. Same careful handwriting on the front, a different date in the corner. 3 days before Andrew died. I stood very still and then sat, the box balanced across my knees. The paper felt cool, the crease sharp. I slid the letter free and saw how the ink grew heavier where he'd pressed, lighter where he'd lifted, a rhythm I knew from lists and notes he'd left on the kitchen counter. "Catherine," it began again, and then, "I couldn't leave this world without setting the whole truth down." He wrote about a girl named Alyssa who was 18 and scared. He wrote that she left a baby at a door with a note that said she wanted him safe, that she'd planned to sign papers to place him, but panic and shame sent her running. He wrote that someone called him, not a stranger, not exactly, a person who knew him well enough to know he'd show up, and that he did. He wrote that I was at work and he couldn't bear the idea of waiting for a committee to decide that child's future. He took the baby home and then he lied to me. He said he told himself he was saving us time, that the right would catch up to the wrong, that love would make it clean. He admitted that once the lie lived between us, he fed it, tended it like a little flame. And when it roared, he pretended it was the hearth we'd chosen. He said he'd wanted to tell me 100 times, but the longer he waited, the more he dressed the lie in good intentions until he couldn't imagine it naked anymore. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't say what I should do with what I'd just read. He said only that the boy we'd raised was good, that nothing about how I'd mothered was counterfeit, that the truth belonged to me now, and he was sorry he had ever tried to keep from me what was mine to carry as I saw fit, too. I set the letter down on the bedspread and stared at the wall until the paint became one flat field, the little variations disappearing. I waited for anger to flood up, to drown everything, and it didn't. What came was a steadying, like when a spinning room quiets if you fix your eyes on a still point. The hurt wasn't that my blood wasn't in him. The hurt was that my trust hadn't been. And even as the ache pressed in, I felt something else open. A door I hadn't realized I was bracing shut. I stood and went to the hallway where the family photos marched along the wall. Ethan with front teeth missing. Ethan in a cardboard crown from a fast food birthday party. Ethan in a suit too big on his first day back from Arizona, shadow on his jaw trying to look older than he was. My fingers hovered over the glass of each frame. I wasn't throwing away my years. I wasn't erasing the boy, but I was done curating a shrine to a version of motherhood that required me to be invisible. One by one, I took the frames down and laid them gently on the dining table. The wall looked bare, honest, not ruined, ready. I brought a soft cloth and wiped the dust from the frames, the motion slow and ordinary, like cleaning your face after crying. I wrapped a few in brown paper and stacked them in the hall closet. Others I left out, not to display to the world, but to keep for myself in a way that didn't ask me to perform. In the kitchen, I pulled a notebook from the drawer and wrote a word at the top of a fresh page: dinner. Under it, I listed names that had kept showing up in my mind all day. Claire, Mr. Carter, Nurse Paula, Tessa, Aaron. People who had handed me small mercies without demanding my story as payment. I added 2 neighbors who waved without nosing in, and a woman from book club who always brought extra napkins and never forgot to ask if anyone needed a ride home. I checked the fridge, the pantry. I didn't want fuss. I wanted food that said, "You can breathe here." Lemon roast chicken, potatoes smashed on a sheet pan until their edges went crisp, a big salad with romaine and peaches, and a squeeze of lemon I could still smell on my fingertips. Bread warmed in the oven until the crust clicked under a knife. I set the list beside the sink and leaned on the counter. The house felt different, lighter by a degree I could feel in my shoulders. I sent texts that were short and plain. "Can you come by tonight? Nothing fancy, just dinner. No need to bring anything." I added one more line to each. "I'd really like to see you." Replies started pinging back almost right away. Yes, of course. What time? Do you want me to pick up ice? I smiled at the screen and typed the details, then put the phone face down so I wouldn't lose the thread of my own thoughts. I put on music low enough to feel like a friend in the room and tied an apron at my waist. I salted the chicken, slid lemon halves and garlic under the skin, tucked sprigs of rosemary along the sides. As I worked, the day rearranged itself inside me. The part where a girl named Alyssa made a choice that started a life. The part where Andrew made a different choice and boxed us all in. The part where I kept choosing love without needing a blood test to tell me if I'd earned it. I didn't have to carry those parts in secret anymore. I could set them down in the open air and let them be what they were. I rinsed potatoes and laid them on a towel to dry. I fished a shallow dish from the back of the cupboard and thought about how many times I'd set a table for people who didn't see me. Not tonight. Tonight, I would invite people who already did. I texted Claire last. "Are you working?" She wrote back, "Off at 6. I can swing by after." "Do you need anything?" I typed. "Just you." I took the vase I'd filled earlier with plain water and set it in the middle of the table. No flowers yet. Still, the clear glass looked right, like a promise made with both feet on the ground. I folded napkins, not to impress anyone, but because the ritual calmed my hands. I slid the chickens into the oven and set a timer. Heat bloomed from the stove, warming the kitchen enough to make it feel like a place where something good could happen. In the living room, I opened the window a crack. A breeze moved the sheer curtains and lifted a line of dust from the sill. I let it go. Not everything needed catching and containing. On the sideboard, the stack of frames waited under their paper wraps. I rested my palm on the top one for a breath, then went back to the kitchen. I texted Erin that I had plenty of food if she felt like coming by, no pressure. She wrote, "I'll be there. Want me to bring my aunt's peach cobbler recipe?" I typed back, "Just bring you." She sent a heart. I rinsed romaine leaves and laid them out to dry, sliced the peaches, squeezed lemon over them so they wouldn't brown. I tore bread into hunks and set them in a bowl with a kitchen towel draped over, ready to warm. The timer beeped. I flipped the potatoes, pressed them with the bottom of a glass so they cracked, then slid them back in. The chickens were starting to lacquer, the skin bubbling, the scent of lemon and garlic and rosemary turning the air around me into something I could stand inside. I breathed it in and felt, for the first time since the kitchen doors at the venue had swung behind me, that I wasn't bracing anymore. I wiped down the counters, checked the bathroom, lit a single candle on the table. Not a centerpiece, not a performance, just light. I straightened the chairs and counted them twice. I added one more at the end in case someone brought a friend who needed a place too. I texted addresses, opened the front gate so the latch wouldn't stick, and wrote a small note on an index card, propped by the doorbell. "Come in." I carried the second letter back to the bedroom and slid it into the envelope with the first. I didn't put them back in the shoebox. I placed them in the top drawer of the desk, where I keep stamps and pens, tools for sending things out into the world with intention. I didn't know yet what I would do with the letters. I knew only that they didn't belong in the dark anymore. On my way back to the kitchen, I paused by the hallway wall. The empty stretch where the photos had been looked like a clean page. I wasn't in a hurry to fill it. When I did, it would be with moments I chose, not proof I was trying to keep a role I had to bleed for. The oven ticked, the house breathed, and I felt my life settle a little deeper into my bones. I pulled plates from the cupboard and lined them along the counter. I set forks and knives on top, not perfectly matched, but good and clean. I checked my phone and saw more yeses. A neighbor who'd only ever chatted with me about the weather, Mr. Carter offering to bring a bottle of something he liked. Nurse Paula promising a pie she'd baked at dawn because sleep had left her early. I said yes to all of it. Bring what you love. Come as you are. I turned the music up one notch and tasted the salad dressing with the tip of my finger. Bright, simple enough. The front room glowed with late afternoon light, and the street outside quieted as the day tipped toward evening. I thought about the answers I could offer if anyone asked where Ethan came from or what I planned to do now, and I realized I didn't owe a statement. I owed myself care and company and the kind of night that ends with chairs pushed back and people lingering because they feel held. I pulled the chickens to rest, spooned the pan juices over them, and stood with my hand flat on the counter until the tremor I hadn't noticed faded. The doorbell chimed, a gentle double note, and I smiled before I moved. I wiped my hands on my apron, reached for the knob, and felt, clean and certain, that I had stepped into a new room in the same house. The bell chimed again, that gentle double note, and I told them to come in. The first to push the door was Mr. Carter with a paper bag and a shy grin. Didn't know what you liked, he said, holding up a bottle. Figured bubbles are friendly. They are, I said, and took the bag. He stepped aside for Nurse Paula, who carried a pie still warm under a check towel. Couldn't sleep, she said. My oven was awake too. It smells like every good Sunday I remember, I told her, and she laughed and set it by the stove. Tessa arrived right after, hair in a scarf, balancing a jar of olives and a little packet of toothpicks like a party in her hands. From a vendor who swears these are the kind you're supposed to dream about, she said. I figured we should test the claim. Perfect, I said, and meant it. Erin came next, a little breathless like she'd jogged the last half block. She didn't bring anything but herself, just like I'd asked. And when she reached me, she paused, searching my face. I touched her arm and let that be the greeting. She went straight to the sink to wash her hands and started tearing romaine without being told. Claire was last, hair damp from a quick shower after her shift, scrubs swapped for jeans and a soft sweater. She set her keys in the bowl by the door and squeezed my shoulder. I can chop, pour, plate, point me. You can taste the dressing, I said, handing her a spoon. She did, made a face like she was thinking, then nodded. Bright, like waking up without an alarm. I set music low. Norah Jones first because it moves at the pace of a heartbeat, then a little Van Morrison, then Stevie Nicks for when the room felt steady. The chickens rested on the counter, their skin lacquered and lemon shining. The potatoes hissed when I loosened them from the sheet. The salad waited in a bowl as big as a basin, with peaches fanned on top. The candle on the table was a small, honest flame. People filled the space the way rain fills a dry path. Easy. No one asked for the story. They asked for a corkscrew and where I keep the plates. Mr. Carter found the good glasses without any fuss. Tessa lined up olives and stabbed one with a toothpick like an invitation. Paula took the bread from the oven and tapped the crust. Listen, she said, and we all went quiet for that soft crack as it cooled. We ate in the first light silence that means hunger is being answered. Then conversation grew in safe directions. Mr. Carter complaining in a half-joking way about his lawnmower, Tessa telling a silly thing that happened at the shop when a shipment arrived with all the ISBNs swapped, Paula describing a stubborn pastry patient, her word for a pie crust, that fought her all morning. Claire told us a story about a kid in the ER who refused stitches until she drew a smiley face on the glove and made it talk. Erin laughed so hard she wiped her eyes. Someone topped off my glass and I let them. I passed the platter and watched hands serve hands. The steam fogged my glasses for a second when I leaned over the potatoes. The table stretched to fit us because I'd added that extra chair, and it turned out we needed it. Erin's neighbor, coming home late, had seen the open gate and the note and called out, "Is that a real invitation?" And I'd said, "It is if you're hungry." She came with her shy teenage daughter and we made space like you make space on a park bench, one small shift at a time. "Try the olives," Tessa told the girl, and the girl did, and her eyes widened. "Okay, that vendor can brag," she said, and the whole table cheered like she'd just passed a test we were all rooting for. At some point, Mr. Carter stood with his glass, a little awkward, and cleared his throat. "I'm bad at speeches," he said, glancing at me, "but I know a good table when I meet one." He lifted his glass toward the candle. To the host, who said it. I felt my face get warm. I lifted mine too, and my voice didn't shake. "To being seen," I said. "For real." "For real," Claire echoed, and we clinked the air and drank. The room settled into that sweet place where everybody has a story and nobody is performing. They asked about recipes, and I told them the truth. Salt early, don't be stingy with lemon, let the potatoes sit long enough to crisp. Paula slid the pie to the middle and cut it into uneven slices that somehow came out fair in the end. "This is the one I make when the day's too heavy," she said. "It's friendly with a fork." Erin reached for the smallest slice and then went back for more. "I forgot what food tastes like when you don't eat it in a car," she said. Tessa nodded. "Or standing over the sink." We all hummed in agreement, like a choir that didn't need words. I realized I was sitting, not hovering. My chair was pulled in and my napkin was in my lap. I didn't feel poised to jump up and fix things. When a fork slipped to the floor, the person who dropped it picked it up and got a clean one from the drawer without asking. When the water ran low, Mr. Carter refilled the pitcher. When the bread basket emptied, Claire tore more pieces while she told Aaron about a new hiking trail they should try when the weather cooled. Between songs, the room found its own tempo. A breeze moved through the open window. Someone asked what I was reading. Tessa promised to set aside a copy of a new paperback and slipped into her bookseller voice for a minute, which made everyone laugh because we all recognize that tone you use when you love a thing. Paula told us about her mother's trick for pie crust. Freeze the butter until it rings when you drop it on the counter. The girl asked if that really works, and Paula said, "Yes, and I'll show you next time," as if she'd already decided there would be a next time. We didn't talk about last night. We didn't have to write an official record. The table itself did the work of editing, of choosing what mattered. It held elbows and plates and a scattering of crumbs, and it held us. After dinner, we moved to the living room with mugs of tea and coffee. Claire took the chair by the window and tucked her feet up. Erin sat cross-legged on the floor with her back against the couch. The teenager sprawled on the rug, flipping through a cookbook like it was a magazine. Mr. Carter dozed for 3 minutes and then startled awake, embarrassed, and we pretended not to see it, which is one of the kindest things you can do. I brought out a small tin of old photos, not the framed shrine pieces, just stray prints that had lived in a drawer. We passed them around. People said the things friends say, "Look at your hair! That couch! We all had that sweater." We laughed, not at me, but with me. The laughter was a soft place to put the day down. Later, when the light leaned fully into evening, Tessa stacked plates in the sink and ran hot water without being asked. Paula dried. Claire packed leftovers into containers I had too many of, writing names on masking tape with the stubby pencil that lives in my junk drawer. Erin wrapped the extra pie and pressed it into my hands. "For breakfast," she said, like a mantra. "Coffee with pie is religion," Paula agreed. "I'll fight anyone who says otherwise." At the door, people lingered. They promised nothing grand. Just a walk next week, a ride if my car ever needed a day in the shop, a text before the weekend to trade recipes for a salad that stays crisp. Mr. Carter pointed at the gate latch. "I can fix that squeak tomorrow," he said. "It's 1 screw in 10 minutes. Come by when it suits you," I said, and he nodded like he would. The neighbor's daughter hugged me quick, the way teens do when they're surprised by their own affection, and said, "Thanks for letting us crash." I told her she didn't crash. She landed. She smiled like that word mattered. When the last goodbye faded and the door closed, the house didn't feel empty. It felt aired out. The candle burned down to a shallow pool. The music clicked off. The fridge hummed like a cat. I stood in the kitchen with my palms flat on the counter and let the quiet come back in. I washed the last 2 plates myself and set them in the rack to dry. I wiped the table and shook the crumbs into my hand, then into the trash. The note by the door that said, "Come in," was still propped up. I left it there. It made sense to me in a way it hadn't before, not as a sign for tonight, but as a small rule for my own life. I put the bottle Mr. Carter brought on the shelf with 2 glasses beside it for some other evening. I slid the leftover chicken onto a plate for sandwiches, tucked the potatoes into a container, and covered the salad with a dish towel. The pie, what was left of it, went in the fridge like a promise for morning. When I finally sat again, it was at the same table, but the room had changed, or I had. My chair held me because I'd claimed it, not because someone assigned it or because the theme allowed it. I looked at the clear vase in the center, empty and shining, and it didn't feel like lack. It felt like space. I raised my water glass toward the quiet candle and whispered, just to hear it in the room, to being seen. The words didn't scrape on the way out. They rang true and stayed. I took a sip and let it sit in my chest. Outside, a car went by slow with its windows down. Somewhere, a dog barked, and then decided it wasn't worth it. I turned off the kitchen light and left the tiny one over the stove, that soft square that makes a house look kind when you walk by at night. I went to bed without checking my phone. I didn't need to. I lay down and found the cool side of the pillow. The day folded itself up without resistance, and for the first time in a while, the story I told myself as I fell asleep had a seat saved for me, right in the middle, where the light actually reaches. A week slid by, every day shaped by small, ordinary things. Coffee with pie, a walk around the block, a chair that no longer felt like it might tip. The note by the door still said, "Come in," because it felt less like a sign for guests now and more like a promise I was trying to keep with myself. On a bright afternoon, the bell rang and then a knock followed, too sharp to belong to Mr. Carter or Claire. I knew before I opened it. Ethan stood on the step with his hands jammed into his pockets, shoulders squared like he'd rehearsed. The gold band on his finger flashed once in the sun. He looked tired in a way that pride doesn't hide. "Hey," he said, like we were meeting by chance. "Hi," I said, and kept my body in the doorway. I didn't move aside. The breeze lifted a corner of the note and set it back. He glanced at the flowers I'd let go brown on the porch table and then back at me. "We need to talk," he said. "We can talk here," I said. He shifted in his shoes. The weight of this didn't need my living room to carry it. He cleared his throat. "Chloe's family is..." People are asking questions about the Facebook post, about vendors calling with cancellations, about the bar, about brunch. It made us look... He stopped, searched for a word, then picked one he could live with. Bad. "I posted a picture of a check I wrote," I said. "I didn't write a single word. You didn't have to," he said. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "You knew what it would do." "I knew what it was," I said. He blew out a breath. "You could have talked to me." "I did," I said, over and over. When I asked where my seat was, when I asked about the program, when I asked to be included instead of staged. The last time I checked, talking isn't just me filling the air. His eyes flicked past me into the house he grew up in. "It was the theme," he said, reflex as quick as a lighter. "We had a plan and..." "I know what the plan was," I said, gentle enough that he stopped. "The plan was to keep everything pretty and smooth. It worked. It also erased me. Those can be true at the same time." He swallowed. "Chloe's upset. Linda is..." He shook his head. "They feel blindsided." "They feel consequences," I said. "You're old enough to tell the difference." He frowned like he was trying to conjure a younger man, a boy I would rush to soothe. "It was one night," he said. "You made decisions that affected everything." "I made decisions about money I provided," I said. "That's not sabotage, that's stewardship. If someone wants more from the bar or a floral wall at brunch, they can pay for it themselves." He pressed his lips together, eyes going glossy for a second before he blinked it away. "You embarrassed me," he said. The words landed like a small stone thrown carefully. "You embarrassed us." I felt the old reflex rise, apologize smooth, hand over my softest parts. I let it wash past and didn't reach for it. "You put me by a kitchen door," I said quietly. "You let people toast new family while I stared at a fire extinguisher to keep from crying. If there was shame in that room, it wasn't mine." He flinched just once. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't. Chloe handled the seating. I trusted her. I thought you were okay. You saw me," I said. "Your eyes found me in that gap every time the door swung. If you didn't know, it's because not knowing was easier." He looked past my shoulder again, a quick, hungry sweep over the hall, the shelf where our life used to be arranged in frames. The blank stretch of wall held his gaze the way a truth does when it refuses to dress itself up. "You took them down," he said. "I did," I said. "Nothing's gone. It's just not a shrine anymore." He wet his lips, looked at his shoes, then back to me. "What do you want from me?" he asked, and for a breath I heard the little boy in that question. "Is this... Do you want me to apologize on Facebook? Do you want me to talk to Chloe? To Linda? Do you want me to pay you back?" "I'm not collecting," I said. "I'm setting terms." He laughed once, a short, unhappy sound. "For what? For being your son?" "For having access to me," I said. "That's not automatic anymore." His face went still, like he was trying to keep it from cracking. "Mom," he said, and the word tugged at something soft in me that would always be soft, no matter what letters said. "The post. People think you're saying I didn't..." He stopped, swallowed. "They're saying I'm not..." I let the pause hold. "The letters are yours to read," I said. The truth is yours to carry. That part of this belongs to you." He blinked. "Letters?" I stepped backward for the first time since I'd opened the door, just enough to reach behind the entry table where I'd set a shallow box before he arrived. I'd put it together over the last few days the way you pack for a trip you didn't plan to take. Careful, practical, without drama. I brought it to the threshold and set it between us. He looked down. Inside, in neat stacks, were printed invoices, bank statements, screenshots with dates, and the casual note that had turned my stomach cold. On top lay 2 envelopes addressed in Andrew's hand. "What is this?" Ethan asked, even though he knew. "Receipts," I said. "So you have a clear picture of what was paid for and by whom. Copies, all of it. Keep them. The emails from vendors confirming the changes, the card statement you didn't see, the transfers with their little jokes in the memo line, and the letters." I touched the envelopes with 2 fingers. They're from Andrew. One is old, one was written 3 days before he died. Read them somewhere quiet. He hesitated, as if the papers might burn him. "Are you—" He caught himself, tried again. "Is this a test?" "No," I said. "It's a handoff. I've carried pieces of this for a long time. Some of them aren't mine anymore." He stared at the envelopes, then at me. "What do they say?" "You'll know when you read them," I said. "And before you ask, no, the hurt isn't about blood. It never was." I let my breath out slow. "It's about standing in a hallway at your wedding and watching you let people treat me like furniture because it kept the picture tidy." He flinched again. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said, not unkind. "And the part that breaks me isn't a chandelier or a flower wall or a canceled set. It's that you saw it and didn't stop it. It's that when you had a moment to turn your face toward me and say my name into that microphone, you didn't." He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand the way he used to when he'd outgrown crying, but hadn't yet learned what to do with grief. "I didn't know what to do," he said into his palm. "You know now," I said. "That's what grown means." He let his hand fall. "Chloe's going to say—" "I don't need to hear what Chloe is going to say," I said. "This isn't a group project. I'm talking to you." He nodded like the words struck, then slid, then caught again. "So what happens now?" he asked, voice small. I thought of all the ways a mother answers a question like that, the dozen lifelines you throw even when no one reaches. I thought of the list I'd written to myself under the subject line, "Next." I chose one clear thing. "Now," I said. "You read what I've given you. You sit with it. You think about what happened and what you did and didn't do. If you want to talk after, you can come back and we'll try again. But I'm not going to explain myself, and I'm not going to debate the shape of my own hurt with you." He swallowed. "You're really not going to let me in?" "Not today," I said. "I don't have a safe place for you in there yet." He looked away, jaw tight. A car rolled by. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and then quieted. The sun pushed a warm rectangle across the porch floorboards and stopped just short of his toes. He nudged the box with the tip of his shoe like he was testing whether it would move if he didn't touch it with his hands. "What am I supposed to tell people?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "Tell them you're figuring it out." His mouth opened and closed. He bowed his head, then lifted it. "Did you ever—" He cleared his throat. "When I was little. Did you ever know? I mean, did you feel it?" "I felt you," I said. The words surprised me with how steady they were. In my arms, in my house, in my car when we sang to the radio. I felt the weight of you sleeping against my shoulder, and the heat of your fever, and the sharp corners of your knees when you wouldn't keep them out of my ribs in the pew. That's what I knew. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. "I don't want to be this person," he said. "Then don't," I said. We stood there long enough for a cloud to pass. He looked at the box again and then finally reached for it. His fingers skimmed the edge like he was afraid he might drop it. He lifted it with both hands and held it close to his chest, the way people hold a thing they aren't sure belongs to them. "Okay," he said, voice rough. "Okay. I hope you'll do the decent thing," I said. "But I'm not waiting for you to do it before I start living like I deserve decent." He nodded, the motion small and careful. His voice faltered. He tried again. "I'll read them." "Good," I said. He didn't ask to hug me. I didn't offer. There are mercies in not pretending. He stepped back one pace, then another. On the bottom step, he stopped. "I love you," he said, and his eyes begged me to make that sentence carry the weight of 100 choices it can't carry by itself. "I know," I said. "I know you do." He waited for me to add something I didn't add. He nodded like he'd heard the whole answer anyway, and turned. The box looked too big in his arms and exactly right. He walked to his car without looking back. I watched him put the box on the passenger seat and buckle it in, some old reflex taking charge while his thinking spun. The absurd tenderness of it hit me, and I let it pass through without making it into a scene. He drove off slow, then faster at the end of the block. I closed the door. The house fell into its ordinary quiet. I put my palm against the wood and felt my breath return to the easy pace it had found this week. In the kitchen, the clear vase stood in the center of the table, empty and honest. I straightened a chair that had drifted a few inches from where it belonged, and then let my hand fall to my side. I didn't text anyone to say he'd come by. I didn't post a thing. I boiled water for tea because that's what my hands wanted to do. The kettle sang. I poured. I sat. The cup was warm in my palms. Outside, the day went on, untroubled by my story. Inside, I let the quiet be the proof that I was keeping my word to myself. A few evenings later, the house felt like it knew what to do. The gate latch no longer squeaked. Mr. Carter had come by with a screwdriver and a hum under his breath and left it better than he found it. The little card by the door still said, "Come in." I straightened it, not for show, but because invitations should look like what they mean. People arrived the way the day softens into night. Claire leaned her bike against the porch rail and brought a small bunch of grocery store tulips, their stems damp in a paper wrapper. "For the clear vase," she said, already toeing off her shoes. Tessa followed with a paper sack of something crackly and good. Nurse Paula carried a casserole that announced itself with butter and cinnamon. Erin came with her aunt's old mixing bowl and a stack of stories she hadn't told me yet. Mr. Carter brought a folding chair just in case, which turned out to be right, because 2 more neighbors saw the gate open and the light warm in the windows and found reasons to be on my side of the sidewalk. We cobbled the meal together like a quilt. Leftover chicken sliced cold with a squeeze of lemon, a pot of soup Claire had put on before her shift ended, Tessa's bread that shattered tender when you tore it, a salad with peaches again because why mess with something that works? I filled the vase, clipped the tulip stems with kitchen scissors, and set them in the center without arranging them to death. They leaned a little, honest as anything. No one hovered at the doorway. No one had to crane their neck to be heard. We took our places like we'd been practicing. Someone bumped the table with a hip and no one winced about the drinks. The candle flickered but stayed lit. Even the silence felt friendly. We talked about small things that opened into bigger ones. Erin's aunt's recipe cards with fingerprints worn into the corners, Mr. Carter's first job, and how he'd been so proud of his name stitched on a patch, Claire's patient who needed a hand to hold more than he needed stitches. Tessa said she'd put aside a book for me and then caught herself. "Only if you want it," she added, like she was learning the new rules right alongside me. "Only if you ask." "I'll ask," I said, and we both smiled. At some point I stood, not to make a performance of it, but because the words wanted to be said on both feet. I lifted my glass and waited until the room tipped toward me. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't rehearse in my head. I let the truth be plain. To every woman who's been parked by a kitchen door and told to be grateful, I said. My voice held. To the ones who paid for the lights and still stood in the dark. To the friends who pull up chairs without asking who belongs. To being seen and to seeing each other. We raised our glasses. To being seen, they answered. Some loud, some soft, all of it landing in the same place. We drank. Paula slid her hand across the table and squeezed mine. Once, like a stamp. Later, when dishes made their slow migration to the sink, people claimed their tasks with a kind of gentle greed. "I've got the plates," Claire said, stacking with an efficiency you only learn by doing. "I'll rinse. Mr. Carter offered, sleeves already rolled. You dry, he told Erin, who laughed because she'd come empty-handed the first night and found her hands full anyway. Tessa scraped crumbs into her palm and dropped them into the trash with a magician's flourish. Abracadabra, she said. Begone. The teenager from down the block wandered in again, like she'd taken me at my word that the note meant her too. She leaned on the counter and told us about an art project that had gone wrong and then accidentally right. We all nodded like jurors who'd reached the same verdict. No one asked me for a speech about the week. No one pointed their fork and asked, "So what now?" The room didn't need an autopsy. It was busy being alive. That was the whole point. When the last mug was dried and set upside down, people lingered again in the doorway like they weren't quite ready to step back into their own houses. Plans spun out. Paula's promise to teach the girl how to make pie crust ring when it hits the counter. Claire's offer to bring her bike pump for anyone whose tires sagged. Tessa's note about a book club meeting if we wanted one without people who talk over each other. Mr. Carter tapped the fixed latch so I could hear the quiet. That's the sound of a problem minding its manners, he said. We laughed because we knew exactly what he meant. On the porch, the air was cool and clean. The tulips in the window looked like a row of small torches. Erin hugged me and didn't apologize for anything she hadn't done. Call me if you wake up early and need company for a walk, she said. I like the world best before it decides what it's going to be. I do too, I said, realizing it was true. After the last goodbyes melted into the dark, the house breathed out. The music had clicked off half an hour earlier and no one noticed. I stood at the table with my palms flat on either side of the vase and let the quiet settle, like a blanket pulled up to your chin. I didn't feel hollowed out. I felt filled. I put leftover soup in the fridge, covered the salad with a plate, slid the bread into a bag. I left 2 clean plates to dry in the rack and the clean dish towel draped over the oven handle. The candle made a low lake of wax and then gave up without drama. I turned off the overhead light and left the soft square over the stove, making the kitchen look like a kind face in the window. Before bed, I lifted the come-in card from the little stand and turned it so the words faced the house instead of the street. It wasn't for passers-by tonight, it was for me. I propped it back up and let the meaning land where it needed to land. Morning arrived the way it does when you've slept, all at once and kind. The light came in clean. The house was the same as the night before, and also not. My first thought wasn't a list of people to manage. It was the simple question of breakfast. I poured coffee and cut a thin slice of Paula's pie, the fork clicking against the plate in that small music that pairs with a quiet kitchen. I stood by the window and watched a dog nose at the patch of sun in the yard until it found it and settled. My phone sat dark on the counter. If anyone had called, I'd hear them later. I was not a switchboard. I was a person with warm coffee and a morning that didn't ask me to audition. I walked the rooms like a guest in my own life and liked what I saw. The wall in the hallway waited. For what? I didn't know yet. And that felt like possibility instead of lack. The clear vase held tulips I hadn't bought to please anyone. The chairs were where I'd left them. The gate opened without complaint. The fixed latch made that quiet sound again when I tested it, as if the house and I were exchanging a small secret. We work. I took the mail from the box and sorted it on the porch bench, tossing the flyers and setting aside the envelopes that mattered. I looked down the street and waved at the neighbor who always stretches in her driveway before running. She waved back, easy as water. Back inside, I rinsed my cup and set it in the sink. I did not think about the kitchen door at the venue. I did not think about microphones and programs and theme words said like scripture. I thought about tonight's dinner. Eggs, maybe, or a sandwich. Something simple. I thought about the list on my desk under the subject line, Next, and how many lines I'd already crossed off. I thought about calling the credit card company again just to hear them say the word confirmed. I didn't plan a statement. I didn't plan a strategy. I took a breath that went all the way down and settled. On the way to the bedroom to dress, I passed the entry table and put a hand on the shallow box I'd picked out for Ethan's papers, the twin to the one I'd handed him. Empty now, it held nothing but the impression of what it once carried. I didn't know when I'd hear from him. I didn't set a clock around it. The space I'd cleared wasn't a waiting room. It was a room of my own. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, hair messy, eyes steady, and I recognized her. Not a supporting character, not a wallet with a pulse. A woman in her own light, in her own kitchen, in her own life. The feeling rose quiet and sure, brighter than any chandelier and steadier than any program. No theme, no approval stamp. Just me, present. I tied my shoes. I opened the door. For a second, I looked back at the card turned inward and smiled. Then I stepped into the day I was making, not the one anyone else staged, and the sun found my face like it had been trying to all along.